Hello, and welcome to the Farmhouse. I'm Candace Wierzbowski.
And I'm Stephanie Spiker.
And today we're welcoming in Christine Smart. Christine is the director of Cornell AgriTech, which is a center for agriculture and food research at Cornell University. Her research focuses on vegetable pathology and disease control. Christine works with farmers across New York to develop disease management options. She also serves on the research team of the Cornell Hemp program, where she focuses on hemp plant diseases and cannabinoid chemistry. Christine also teaches courses on plant sciences. But before we get to Christine, Stephanie has a little treat for you all.
I do. Our little treat today comes to you out of Lehigh County, Pennsylvania, and it is from an article on LancasterFarming.com that's titled Red Cat Farm's Sustainable Niche Grain Products Find a Market. This article focuses on Tina Bailey. She owns Red Cat Farm with her husband. It's a pretty cool story because Tina kind of just stumbled her way into grain production. She started out focusing on gardening and planted some winter wheat basically as a cover crop. But as it grew and matured, she thought it was so pretty that she decided to not actually till it under, but instead she just let it mature and harvest fully. And that kind of led her to completely shifting the farm into where it's going now as a value-added grain operation. So she does proprietary milled wheat, oats, and rye products. It's also cool, she gets the grain milled at this old mill that dates back to 1730, which is kind of wild.
Cool. Yeah.
And the mill still uses antique equipment to make the stone ground flours, meals, and grains. Tina sells her grains and flours at farmers markets and other direct-to-consumer methods. She said in the article that demand is starting to kind of exceed her supply. She's considering trying to add some more acreage to increase her harvest, but she's also really hoping that maybe other farmers might be interested in stepping into these niche grain markets in the Lehigh Valley area. So it's a pretty cool article. It's a cool story to just almost by accident, stumble into this very cool path. So yeah. You can read all about Tina and her grains at LancasterFarming.com.
Very cool. All right, and now let's bring Christine Smart into the farmhouse.
Chris, welcome to the farmhouse. Thank you for joining us.
I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you for having me.
So give us a little bit of an overview of what you do as the director of Cornell AgriTech, and what are some of the research projects that you're working on right now?
Right. So I sort of have two hats. One as director of Cornell AgriTech, which is a campus of Cornell University. I'm also an associate dean in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences in my director role. And that is really about helping to set the vision for what we're going to do here at the experiment station. So Cornell AgriTech is the New York State Ag Experiment Station. We have about 300 people that work here, and we have graduate students and postdocs, and it's really about working together to say, okay, what are some of the solutions facing agriculture that we really want to tackle? And then with my researcher's hat on, 50% of my job is researchers. I'm a plant pathologist. And so I study diseases of crops like vegetable crops and hemp. And I have graduate students in my lab that work on all sorts of disease issues of those crops.
Sounds like you're busy.
Yeah.
It keeps me out of trouble.
So I wanted to look into the tech part of agritech.
Mm-hmm.
What are some common misconceptions about how agriculture and tech come together? And what is agritech doing to kind of dispel those misconceptions?
Thank you so much for that question. In many people's minds, agriculture and technology don't actually dovetail. And in reality, as you guys know, you can't do ag without technology these days, which is great. So what we're doing is we have folks that are working on robotics that will go through the field and have early detection of disease or help in harvest. We have a weed scientist that has the most amazing set of equipment. She has a laser weeder that she's trying out, and she has electric weeders, ways to reduce inputs in agriculture, but still increasing or keeping yields the same. And so the technology is amazing. We have a scientist that works with NASA on remote sensing from satellites and looking at yield and disease potential and insect damage. And all of that comes together under a term that we call agriculture intelligence. And so you've heard of artificial intelligence. Well, ag intelligence includes that AI, but also the remote sensing, the robots, and the people, because you can't do ag without people. So how are we then bringing that to a broader audience, which is your question? I give several talks every week to community members, to master gardeners, to agricultural groups about what we're doing, because I think it's really important to increase the communication between the public sector and the ag research sector so that it doesn't feel spooky what we're doing. What we're doing is working on food security and safe food for everyone.
Yeah, and I would say what you're doing is very cool. I mean, this might be me being a little poorly informed, but when you talk about like the laser weeder, like all I think of is like a little droid from Star Wars, like rolling through the fields and going like pew pew and like eliminating the weeds. Can you tell me a little bit more like what is, because that's the one I've kind of latched onto. What is the laser tech?
Yep. So first, let me say the woman that you need to interview is Lynn Sosnowski. She's
Okay.
a professor here at Cornell, a weed scientist. But she shares with me because it is a laser weeder is a story that lots of people think, wow, how does that work? And in a video that she has, I can share the link with you guys. It does. It looks like Star Wars.
Oh my gosh.
I love this.
Right now, it's a huge machine. But of course, as technology advances, it will get smaller. And you train it with AI to identify seedlings, like a beet seedling or a spinach seedling. And then if there's a plant, a small plant, that's not a beet or a spinach, it gets laser zapped.
Very
Wow.
cool.
And that plant dies. But there's a lot of research that also has to go into that in terms of is that doing anything to the healthy soil microbes that might be there? Is that modifying beet as a root crop? Is that modifying the beet? And Lynn is doing all of that research, which is really exciting.
That's fascinating. That's very cool. Let's talk a little bit about your background in plant pathology. So, how have plant diseases evolved over the years? And then, what can growers do to keep up with the changes?
Plant diseases are known for evolving to overcome host resistance. So if you have a potato or a tomato plant that this season is resistant to late blight, a very common disease, fairly common disease of potato and tomato, that pathogen that causes late blight can mutate to overcome the resistance in the host. And that's something that all of us hate, right? Because the breeders work really hard to get a plant that's resistant, and everyone works hard, to make sure that it grows well and it's marketable for the people that are growing it. And then when the pathogen overcomes that resistance, then all the plants die and you have to start over again. So that's one way in which the pathogens are evolving. Another way is when folks are using fungicides, control strategies, the pathogens can also mutate to overcome or become resistant to those control strategies that farmers are using. And then one thing that's happened much more recently is the movement of pests into areas that they have not been in before because of a warming climate. So here in New York and in Pennsylvania, we've seen that, right? Our winters are not as harsh. And so we're now seeing insects that couldn't survive the winter here before surviving. A case that has just come up in New York is there's a disease called corn stunt. And the vector of corn stunt was a tropical disease. You would find it in the southern US. And, just within the last several weeks, it was identified here in New York. And we think that's because the climate is warmer, the vector can survive here, and our corn is now at risk as well. And so those are several different ways that we really need to stay on top of and be in front of in order to enable growers to have a vibrant crop.
Wow. It sounds almost like a two steps forward, one step back type of thing. Like you make all this progress with stuff and then the pathogens just kind of come along behind you.
Yeah, and that's been happening for, 170 years of plant pathology.
So, do you think the consumers ever see anything from this? Like, is there ever a trickle down effect, whether that's prices or availability, as you guys are out there fighting this fight?
Absolutely. Several years ago, we had late season rains, and many of the pumpkins um, became diseased, the fruit themselves that were lying in the field, because we had heavy rains, they were sitting in water, and they either rotted because of water or had got a disease that I actually happened to work on. And we saw a decrease in the total number of pumpkins available for folks to buy from the Northeast, as well as an increase in prices. And you see that in other commodities as well, right? As soon as there's a shortage of that commodity, you're going to see an increase in prices. Sometimes in the grocery store, you'll also see some produce that might be smaller or not quite the way you're used to seeing it. And part of that is because there might be less product available. And so you're seeing some of the product that may previously not have made it to market.
So, we're going to pivot a little because I know part of your job is also educating at Cornell. So, can you tell us about the kind of young people you see that are entering higher education to study agriculture these days? What are they interested in? Have you seen any noticeable changes in the last few years or so regarding all that?
I have the students that are entering land grant universities. I'm fortunate to be able to visit lots of universities across the country. They want to be part of a solution. It's completely inspiring to talk to undergraduates. My advisees are always talking about, well, if I take this class, will it help me figure out this food security problem? Or they really want to be part of a solution, which I find to be really inspiring. Uh, there's also a great interest in interdisciplinary majors because people are seeing that you can't just study a plant disease because it's part of a huge system. And the students want to learn about climate, they want to learn about disease, they want to learn about production systems and engineering. Engineering has absolutely become part of something that most students want to learn about. I'll include AI and computer programming in that as well.
That is inspiring. I mean, we see all the time, like the kids that we hear about here at Lancaster Farming, some of them are in like FFA or 4-H, and they're incredible. So many of them. It gives me hope for the future.
Yeah.
100%.
They are so much more on top of things than I think that I was. I know that I was at that age.
Absolutely. The questions that they're asking, one of the things we try very hard to do is make sure that all of the students have an experiential learning opportunity. Some of that might be connected with cooperative extension or, with me, and we'll be going to growers' fields. And the real excitement for me for that education comes when the students are talking with the extension educators or the growers, asking questions. And then the growers will say, well, a question that I have is, why is this pathogen mutating faster, more quickly than that one, right? Why do I have so many more challenges with this particular bacterial pathogen than this fungal pathogen? And the students will take that and then start to think about, well, how do I design an experiment to answer that question, to solve that specific problem? So the idea of solving challenges that are current and relevant to agriculture is huge.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome to hear.
Right? I agree. I find it incredibly inspiring.
All right. So, we talking about like college students and a little bit with high school, but I know you also work with developing partnerships between Cornell and elementary schools to increase ag awareness. So, what do these partnerships kind of entail, and why do you find them so important?
The future of ag is why I find them so important. I think that many people, myself included, I grew up in the suburbs and I didn't really know where my food came from. So many folks think your food comes from the grocery store. And having the opportunity to work with elementary school students to get them gardening and working with plants and even just understanding the vocabulary of a seed and a seedling and how that works. enables them to start to think about where their food comes from at a much younger age. And the idea would be then to have them go into a 4-H program. We have a after school 4-H program that's absolutely fantastic here. I'm in Geneva, New York. And then they might go into a FFA program or stay in 4-H. And so having that connection to food, I think the younger we can start students, the better. And to be honest, it's absolutely fun, right? I mean, some things in life you do because they're important, but also because they're fun. And working with the local school districts and hearing from the teachers about everything they're doing and how they could then incorporate plant science or agriculture into that is really fun. Thinking broadly about education and about agriculture and how to weave those two together. Working with the school district and ensuring that it's a partnership is absolutely key.
Yeah. It's definitely, pretty rare nowadays for kids to grow up farming or really understanding farming, and so it's great that you guys are able to kind of give them that hands-on experience. But you said you didn't grow up farming either, so how did you come into agriculture?
So when I went to college at Michigan State University, my family lived outside of Detroit at the time, and I thought that I wanted to go into like biomedical science, right? I was gonna save the world through human, you know, prevent disease and things like that. The first 2 years of college, you tend to take physics and chemistry courses that everyone takes. Fall semester of my junior year in college, as part of the animal human science pathway, I was taking embryology and comparative physiology and all of these courses that involved working with live or dead animals. And in that semester, I realized that working with live and dead animals was perhaps not for me. And so I went to my advisor. This is one of the reasons I absolutely love advising undergraduates. I went to my advisor and said, I'm leaving biology. I'm going to go into economics. I picked the
Big
thing that
step.
seemed
Very different, yeah.
farthest away, right? And she said, Chris, you you only need one more class to get your degree in biology. So let's go ahead and take that class. And then you can take all of these other economic classes, whatever you want. And so I said, okay, but it can't be anything about animals. And I ended up in a plant class and completely fell in love with it and began the understanding of there are many ways to contribute, that science can contribute to life on Earth and to solving real world problems. And it's not only through animal and human health.
And that's great. Good
Yeah.
job for your advisor. I mean,
Right?
I've been there too. I switched my major in a pretty drastic way. I'm happy with how it all shook out, but that's what college is for.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and as I said, I love having undergraduate advisees just for that reason.
So you note on your Cornell page that, as the population that farms decreases, it's more critical than ever to educate the rest of the population about how our food is produced. So how do you advise farmers go about engaging the public about matters of ag?
I think that I think that it can be hard for a single farmer by themselves to try to educate the public on matters of ag. But I've seen so much success of people that are involved in farming that might be on the school board or as working with master gardeners will frequently bring someone from the local farming community in to discuss that with the master gardener program that tends to work with homeowners. And in Cornell Cooperative Extension and other cooperative extension systems across the country, I know that we work very hard to ensure that we're explaining to the public the importance of the agricultural community and the interaction with the agricultural community. And communication is key. I think that many grower communities are doing a great job of at farm stands having information about, oh, here's this, new crop that we're growing that we didn't grow last year, and here's a cool thing about it. Some of the local farm stands and those engagements with the public are really making a difference. I'll say the other thing that has made a huge difference, at least that I've seen here in New York, is the farm to fork local food movement. There's so many restaurants that will now say, oh, our cabbage came from the farm down the road, and describe where they got their food. There are some grocery stores that are doing that as well. And I think that really helps connect your food to the human people that are growing it.
Yeah, I like that. I think most people like the idea of eating something that was grown in their community and supporting farms in their community as opposed to supporting farms from wherever else. You know, it does feel good to know that you're contributing to someone's livelihood.
And it's also super fun because, when I'm visiting Georgia, the crops that are grown there are very different than the crops that we can grow here in New York. And so it makes for a really fun set of restaurants and culinary activities.
Oh, for sure. And I feel like I'm more likely, like if I go out to a restaurant and they have on their menu, like we get our beef from this farm or whatever it is, that honestly, I'm probably more likely to go back. Like it's like, oh, great. Like I'm eating local just by going here. So it's a good marketing tool as well.
Absolutely.
So we're going to shift a little bit because you do so much different stuff at Cornell. But can you tell us a little bit about your work with the Cornell hemp program?
Yes, I can. I do work. I'm part of the Cornell hemp program. I study and work on diseases of hemp. We do a lot with grain and fiber hemp production. And my lab is focused on some of the more common diseases that we would see in hemp. However, broadly at Cornell, we're looking at hemp fiber production, hemp breeding, for new cultivars for grain, fiber, and some for CBD production as well. And then also looking at flowering time. So hemp cultivars for different latitudes. We really have a lot going on here in hemp.
Yeah, keeping busy. So Cornell AgriTech I saw online also partners with the USDA for a hemp seed bank. So can you kind of explain what that is and why it's important?
That is an amazing, amazing resource that the USDA provides to the world, really. There is a germplasm repository, which means every possible variety of a crop known for almost every crop that exists. So here in Geneva, we have that germplasm repository that the USDA runs for apples, some stone fruits, some cold hardy grapes, and for hemp, several other vegetables as well. In hemp, it only started, there had been a germplasm repository many years ago, but when all cannabis became outlawed, all of that seed was destroyed. So for seed crops, it's essentially like a giant vault where all of the different varieties, seed of all of the different varieties of hemp would be stored. And then those can be requested. You can go online and request any of the seed that they have. Of course, that means that the folks that work in that hemp germplasm repository have to be renewing that seeds. There's lots of breeding and seed collection and harvesting that is involved there. But it's an incredible resource to the community because anyone can then ask for that variety if you're looking at a specific aspect of the grain or disease resistance or insect resistance. You can get the diversity of DNA genomes that exist in hemp through all of these different hemp varieties. And it's really, really exciting.
Yeah, that's like fascinating to like I love the mental image of like opening a giant vault and just all the different seeds everywhere.
Yeah, and one of the things we're doing is we have a partnership with the scientists at the USDA, and each summer we're growing out about 100 different varieties. And what I do is inoculate them with different diseases to see which ones are resistant and which ones are susceptible to common diseases that we have here in New York. So my job is to try to kill as many of those plants as possible so that people will know, oh, those plants are susceptible, but these ones are resistant. So if I'm looking for resistance to this disease, that's the one I want to order.
Nice. Yeah. All right. So what does being a woman in ag mean to you?
First, it means that I get to work in agriculture, which I absolutely love. I think that farmers are the most creative, ingenious, and entrepreneurial people that I know because of the breadth of the work that they do. It also means that I get to think broadly about the future of agriculture and food security. And when I do that, I think about the importance of having all of the voices at the table, because everybody is going to come with a different idea, and the best answers are going to come when all of those ideas get mixed up together and, oh, we never thought about that together before. And I think women have a very important role in helping solve the problems that we're facing. So I think it's really exciting, and I feel like I have the best job in the world.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's lovely to hear. Yeah.
Can I ask you guys, how did you get into this podcast? I've been dying to know that.
Oh, wow, that's I don't know. Well, it's a long story.
It was honestly the initial, I think, concept for it came from Eric.
Yeah, and I feel like he's been talking about it honestly for a number of years. I think it's something that, like, pre-COVID, he had the idea of a Women in Ag podcast, like, brewing. It just never really was able to take shape until last year at this time is when it really started to form into a more fully fleshed out idea.
Well, we had to come back to the office from COVID. And when we came back to the office, we are now in a different location than we were previously before the pandemic. And when they renovated this new office for us, they included a space for a studio. And so all of a sudden there's like resources being put toward podcasts here. And so I think, Eric kind of realized like, all right, like now is the time. And he approached us and he was like, would you guys be interested in doing this? And so I think that was also something that he needed people that were willing to go on air, because he was like, I shouldn't be the host of a Women in Ag podcast.
Which I give him a lot of credit for coming up with the idea, but then also realizing like maybe it's not his place to be in it fully. So he approached us, and neither of us have ever done any kind of podcasting before this, so we were very much stepping out of our comfort zones.
Oh, yes.
I think we both were just so into the idea, and we love, especially now that we've done it. I think you might be episode 37, something like that. So now that we've interviewed like 30-some different women, it's like, oh, this is so fun to be able to hear all of these stories and share everything. So.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You've been doing it for like a year? How long is that?
I think the first episode was in January of this year, so it'll be about a year. Yeah.
About a year. That's awesome.
Yeah. At this point last year, we were like just like figuring out like the name and the concept and everything.
I absolutely love it. I hadn't known of it until Eric mentioned it, but I think it's really fantastic.
No, thank you.
I mean, we really enjoy doing it. So, and just, I think it's so fun getting to meet all these cool women, even virtually meet everybody. So,
absolutely. That's great.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I feel like we learned a lot.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me, and it was wonderful to meet you, Steph and Candace.
I really enjoyed getting to talk to Chris. I feel like she is just so fascinating and smart and easy to talk to. So that was a really fun one for us.
I agree. So smart. Really funny, I thought.
Also, oh my gosh, she would have been, I think, the best professor. I had some great professors. I definitely did. But I feel like she would have been top tier, like 5 stars on Rate My Professor for sure. Oh,
yeah, absolutely.
So we both were fascinated by these little laser robots.
I know, not so little yet, but hopefully in the future. All I have in my head, even though she told us what they actually are, is just like a little like kind of BB-8 style robot rolling down the field, shooting lasers everywhere, and maybe one day that's what it will become. But
I immediately pictured, okay, everyone's familiar obviously with like a Roomba, right? But they have them as like little lawnmowers too. So they're just like slightly bigger than a Roomba, and they just like go through your yard. That's kind of what I pictured, is like a Roomba rolling through the fields. I don't know if that's practical.
One day, maybe.
But the other thing that kind of struck me when Chris was talking was when she was saying about how like there's that new disease in corn in New York. It's not a new disease, but it's new to New York, and it was only ever found in the South. And it's just like diseases and pests are shifting because, you know, it is, you know, I mean, my gosh, this week that we're recording this in Pennsylvania, it is the first week of November, and it's been like close to 80, which is kind of wild. And it made me think of back in August, I went to Ag Progress Days up at Penn State, and I listened to this talk about bees, and they were talking about tracking all the species of bees in Pennsylvania, and that they're finding a lot of bee species that used to never be here, that used to be native to like Virginia or North Carolina. So it is just like, I get it, it's just kind of inevitable, I guess, now that it's getting warmer, that you're going to start seeing things that you're not used to in your part of the world, which is a little scary.
The ecosystem is changing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we know that when a new species comes in, it can take the ecosystem a while to figure out how does that species fit in. Like, I'm thinking of the lanternflies,
right?
Because
like
that has been a major thing in Pennsylvania, right? And, you know, we're all on alert for lanternflies. You know, we just scraped a bunch of lanternfly eggs off the tree in my backyard, but we're still kind of waiting for birds and other natural predators to realize, like, you can eat these things, because it takes a while for those species to realize this isn't poisonous, this is something that I could eat. It takes a while for nature to react to that sort of thing.
Yeah, which I guess that's why it's so important to have like people like Chris who are researching pathogens and disease and stuff, because while the corn in New York, it probably would take a very long time on its own to figure out this disease. It hopefully, with all the research going into it, won't take like, you know, Chris and other pathologists as long to figure out a way to help farmers along. So at least
we'll get some help.
Yeah, there's backup.
And who knows, maybe with the pests coming up, maybe we'll have a pest robot next that can sweep down the fields and eliminate them.
Pew pew.
I need a pest robot for my garden. I'm still in constant battle with the squirrels. Always. It's never ending. Oh, I guess, you know, I am just going to say this on the podcast because it is kind of funny. So in my embattled garden, this year I had to replace all of my bulbs because it's been, you know, 4 or 5 years, and so my bulbs are exhausted and they need new ones. And I was so concerned about the squirrels getting to my bulbs after I planted them that I read somewhere that if you plant forks, tines up around in your garden where your bulbs are, the squirrels won't get them because they don't like the feel of the tines on their feet.
Was it Crystal Snyder?
Yes, I think so.
I think she mentioned that too when we talked to her.
Well, now my front garden is full of forks and bulbs, and I didn't think ahead and get like black forks or clear forks. I got white forks. So from the sidewalk, you can see that my like garden in front of my house is just full of forks and owl decoys, and I've become the like crazy owl fork lady of Lawrence Avenue.
Please, please.
But they're working.
Please take a photo of the forks, just for me, if not for, I don't know how we would show any of you guys, but I would like to see them. So
they are working. No soil has been disturbed since I planted those bulbs.
Oh,
so
geez.
I think that wraps it up for us today.
Gardening tips from Candace.
Thank you all for listening. If you like this episode, please consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. If you really like this episode, please consider leaving us a review.
If you have any questions or thoughts about this episode or the podcast in general, you can email us at farmhouse@lancasterfarming.com.
You can also find us on social media at Lancaster Farming on most platforms.
Thank you again for listening and visiting us here at the Farmhouse. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Candace.
We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
This episode of The Farmhouse is copyright 2024 by Lancaster Farming newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family.
It was written by Stephanie Spiker and Candice Wierzbowski. Produced by Eric Herlock. The music is courtesy of Tim Bird Shadow.